and he's going to talk about what's been happening. So I want to introduce him. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you coming here today, and thanks. So we're going to
thank you all very much for allowing me a little time on your meeting this afternoon. I am going to keep my comments really light so I can answer what questions you have. I think first and foremost I want to thank all of you and express my appreciation for the work you do day in and day out with our students. I've been in this job actually 2 years on election day, and I tell people I've represented you up and down the state. It's remarkable that we have 112 colleges and more than 2 million students, and I have yet to have anybody come up to me and say, you know, you didn't do a good job teaching my son or daughter or my husband and wife or me. It's remarkable that a system this large can do as well as it does, and that's a testament to the work you all do in our classrooms and in our offices, in our libraries and counseling centers day in and day out. So I certainly appreciate that. I won't spend a lot of time updating you on accreditation related matters because I suspect all of you are sort of Jeopardy ready on that subject. The one development that's happened in the last couple of weeks that I think you probably have seen because it went through consultation last week is that I am recommending to the Board of Governors in November to strip the specific accreditor out of the board regulations. And although there are a variety of reasons for doing that, I think the most significant one is that things are changing, and the board, I think all of us have questions and concerns about accreditation, and we just thought the timing was right to allow a little bit more flexibility in that regard. So that's the latest development as it relates to accreditation in general. Statewide, we at one point approached having about 20% of our colleges on some kind of sanction. That thankfully now has dropped down to about 14%, and hopefully it will continue to drop, but it is certainly a concern for all of us. And you know, without getting into answering what I'm sure will be your questions, it's been a very interesting time related to accreditation since I took this job in November of 2012. So with that, I'm going to stop any comments, and I'll open it up to questions.
Yes, Carol.
Well, I have a list of questions. Can I ask all of them?
You can ask them all. There's other people who wanted to, if we have time to come back, if they're related. So I don't know what that means. You have a list that could go on forever.
It's not going to go on forever. Well, I'll ask until you give me this. How's that?
Okay.
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 Right. Okay. Hi. How are you? Good. So my question for you is, when you were on the faculty back when, you were full-time, correct?
Started as an adjunct and then was a
You were adjunct and then you went full-time. You got a salary and benefits. You were able to pay your bills and support your family, I assume, correct?
Yep.
So shouldn't you be advocating the same now for faculty upon whom you rely on to deliver results for your organization?
I guess the implication of your question is that I don't believe in faculty having a living wage, and that's sure not true.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Everybody. So, because right now what's happening is the faculty at CCSF.
Okay, and then that's going to be a Carol. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet it's a good one then. Well, basically, I mean, CCSF faculty earned what they did in 2007, which is less than we did, which is a 19% pay cut. And San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities in the country, actually in the state. Some faculty have been forced to move out of the city they serve. Is this right?
Well, I don't think it's ever right that faculty can't live in reasonable proximity to where you teach. Interestingly enough, in Sacramento we had a similar problem with Sacramento City College, which is in the center of a high-cost area. And so at the time we were looking into developmental partnerships on some of our land that would allow us to build faculty and student housing. So no, I don't think it's a good idea to have faculty not able to be in some proximity where they work.
Yes, Al.
Thank you for coming, and also thank you for considering taking out the ACCJC as the named creditor. What are specifically your next steps in making that happen? And in this process, will you be soliciting a constituency input?
Yes, we took it forward to consultation last Thursday, and that's the process that we use for constituency input. And we got quite a bit. Actually, we got some input even before it got to consultation, and we made a couple of changes as a result of that. The next step is that it will go for first reading to the Board of Governors in November, and then it will go back for their final consideration in January.
Okay. Yes, Alan Fisher?
Yes, you mentioned that we have 2 million community college students in California, but that's down during the last few years from about 2.9 million. Could you explain why that is, and do you agree that we need to head in the opposite, we need to go back up, we need to expand? At City College, we've lost about 30% of the students since this crisis hit, and we need, would you help us, would you support the idea of access to education for all people in our society?
Well, absolutely. The numbers are specifically, we had about 2.6 million students in the system at our high water mark 0809, and we've lost 500,000 literally in terms of head count. And if you look at the trajectory on which we were headed, we probably denied education to somewhere in the neighborhood of 600,000 to 700,000 students statewide. That was as a result of the state's worst fiscal crisis they've seen since the Great Depression, and they therefore cut our budgets, and we therefore were forced to ration education. We've, as a result of a lot of you in this room and the students who passed Prop 30, we've been able to add back in the first half year enough sections statewide to serve 20,000 more students. Last year, enough to serve 40,000, and in the current budget year, enough to serve 60,000. So we've made a modest down payment on what we lost, but the restoration of access is going to take some more time. I think this system ought to have 3 million plus students in it, and by 2025, I would sure hope that's where we are. But it is a function of the available resources the state is willing to invest, not only in community colleges, but in CSU and UC as well.
Okay. Yes, Jessica.
So I have a related question, comment. Despite the introduction of a super trustee here at CCSF, despite the introduction of a super trustee here at City College, we continue to hemorrhage students. Our enrollment is on a steep decline, and the district projections do not show promise of regaining students, which looks a little different than the rest of the state. We have stability funding, but that's only a stopgap measure, while the imposition of the super trustee is a dismal failure here. What changes are you making to turn around this enrollment crisis?
Well, the enrollment management activities are actualized here at the college. What I've tried to do in support of that is, as you pointed out, the stabilization legislation that we ran. And I think that there's actually 3 contributing factors to the decline of enrollment you've experienced. One of them certainly is the accreditation woes of the institution. The second is that there are a couple of areas in the state, the Bay Area being chief among them, that have experienced a dramatic uptick in employment, which tends to run counter to enrollment in community colleges. And then this continued fiscal rationing that we're still trying to come out of. So those 3 combined have hit this college harder than most of the rest of the state. So what I can do is to continue to work in the legislature to try to get the resources restored. And by the way, I'm guardedly optimistic about the next 2 or 3 years in that respect. I am very worried about the sunsetting of Prop 30 in 2 tranches, one in 16 and the other in 18, and I think the state's going to have to face that. But then the marketing and the communications and our doors are wide open activity really will be based here at City College.
Okay, Yes, what we do with the Giants. Go Giants.
Hi. I hear you talk about the three things you just talked about the ACCJC and this whole graduation process, the upswing in employment, things like that.
A little louder.
I just heard him talk about three things as far as the decrease in enrollment here at City College. I don't think I'm wrong in this, but please tell me if I am. The effect that this whole process of ACCJC has had on this campus is way more than an upswing in employment and the financial situation. This has had profound effect on this institution. Many of us have been here for decades teaching. We haven't had a raise for how many years now is it? 7? That's beside the point. We need your help, even though I was here when you came to talk to the board back several years ago, and frankly I was extremely disappointed, I have to say, with the demeanor of that meeting. How are you going to help us in this particular situation, since we're the flagship institution in the organization as far as enrollment, or at least we were? Help us get past ACCJC, because there's been tremendous injury to happen here because of that process, and the special trustee, and the dissolution of the board. It has not worked well, and now we have an administration that is extraordinarily rigid. And is our own administration now an ally of us? Some of us question that. How can this be helped?
Well, to answer, your question, as you know, I recommended to the Board of Governors, and they made the decision to elevate the special trustee and set the elected board on the sidelines. And I don't, standing here today, believe that was an incorrect decision. The process of restoration of the college and due in large part to a lot of hard work on many of you and many others in the institution, I think has progressed pretty impressively. I have said in a couple of occasions that I think the attitude of the Accrediting Commission switched somewhere in the middle of 13, and it became considerably more punitive and less in support of the work that the college is trying to do to restore its accreditation. So one of the reasons that I reactivated the accreditation task force and that I'm making that recommendation to the board is because I do have serious concerns about the way accreditation is being administered in the Western region, and specifically in our colleges. So I'm going to continue to push that agenda until I think that is back in balance, or we've gone to the board and recommended a different accreditor. In terms of the health of the institution and the support, I'm going to do everything in my power to be supportive not only of the administration but of the faculty and staff here as well. We are going to come forward to the board in November with a plan for returning the college ultimately to the oversight of locally elected trustees, which is part of the things that have to be done. So those are the specific things that we have tried to do up to now and will continue to do.
Yes, Nancy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm following up with the last thing you said, ultimately to have restored a democratically elected board. What exact steps and what timeline ultimately, can mean anything. So what exact steps will you take to restore our democratically elected board? We have an election coming up. And what timeline? Because we feel a great deal of urgency to get a
I have to go forward to the board in November with a recommended process and general timeline. And between now and then, the board asked that I meet and talk with the trustees. And so between the election day and the board meeting, I'll have individual conversations with the newly elected and the existing trustees. And then at the November meeting, I'll come forward to the board with a recommendation. And by the way, you'll be able to see that a little bit in advance because it'll be included in the board materials that get mailed out and put on the website. I can't go into a great deal of detail about that because that process is still in development, but I think that what you'll ultimately see is a recommendation to the board that would phase in restoration of decision-making to the local board over a period of time, and that the special trustee would remain with stay and rescind powers in the beginning, and then ultimately the board would take over full decision-making authority for everything at the college, and the special trustee would remain as an advisor for a period of time, and then ultimately be backed out of the.
What period of
Yeah.
time?
Get rid of Umbrella now.
Yeah.
Umbrella's got to go. So Tyler's got to go. Get rid of those people. They're terrible for our college. The administration has got to go.
What do you mean by phase-in restoration? What's the timeline on that?
What kind of date are we looking at?
I think you see the beginning of that process early in 2015, and I think the full restoration of power of the board would be over the next year to year and a half. And that would be that'd be in association with the 2-year restoration period, so that the college fully meets the standards in time for that.
Okay, Tariq.
So I'm having trouble with the responses you gave.
Speak
I'm
up.
having trouble with the response you gave to my colleague in the back. I'm not sure what her name is. When you outlined the process by which we got a special trustee and everything subsequent to that. So you believe that the special trustee was a good idea, that somehow this would get us to accreditation. So we had a special trustee with powers of veto. And this took place from 12 through 13. And then you said somewhere in 13, the ACCJC switched its position. And so in July of 13, we were notified that we would be closed out. Your response to that was to elevate the special trustee to a special trustee with extraordinary powers. And I'm not sure what sense that made, since the trustee with the trustee as a veto power, that failed. With respect to the ACCJC, I'm wondering why did they even steal a body that we use? Let me give a few examples. So in July or August of 2013, after they announced the show cause rules, one of the 4 leaders of the ACCJC, Frank Gornick, wrote a letter to the Chronicle of Higher Education, which you probably saw, in which he said that CCSF, that any community college that's in solid ground will be academically sound, financially solvent, and administratively strong. He said CCSF has not been any of those things for several years. Now let's assume that the two final, the administratively and financially there were some problems. CCSF has always had an excellent academic record. Now I assume he had to know that. Even if he didn't have your statistics from the Board of Governors would show that, he had to know that from the ACCJC statistics. Yet he claimed that we were not financially a solid institution.
You mean
Academically, I'm sorry. Academically. Now, there are nice ways to say people are lying. You can say that they're mistaken, that they've forgotten, but that is a blatant untruth. Earlier this year, in fact, in response to the letter that you and the mayor wrote about giving CCSF more time, the response to that by Commissioners Amador and Kinsella claimed that candidacy was the solution. And in that they claimed that if CCSF went into candidacy, then they would be eligible for government support. Right? Now again, I have to assume that either they are so inept that they have no business in charge of anything, or that they were being deceptive. finally, and this is, I mean, I could go on, but I, you know, Tim's gonna stop me.
I was getting into it too.
When the pressure was being mounted against them about, you know, not closing the school, and, you know, the president, Barbara Benno, claimed that they had to do this because of the Department of Education. The Department of Education's response was, you know, no, you don't. And their response, again, this is in print, her response was that this is gibberish. Now, this is a response to what the Department of Education had to say. Why is this agency still in charge of anything? Why is this agency still operating to accredit anything in this state? There's a blatant, the fact that you would close a school like this that's so successful academically, that shows a kind of, I mean, what kind of judgment is this? Whatever the problems were administratively and financially, there should have been time to fix them. You know, and 5 years wouldn't have been too much time to fix them, and yet instead we had eight months. This shows a lack of judgment, which is incredible. Why is this agency still operating?
That's a great question.
I obviously agree with your assessment of the time required, and that's why I wrote the letter to ACCJC telling them that the college needed at a minimum a year.
The microphone isn't working, so it's not hooked up. So talk loud.
I'll speak up a little more, and that's the reason I sent ACCJC the letter telling them that I thought the college needed a full 2 years. So I certainly agree with that. Now, as to why they're continuing to accredit colleges, they are, according to the U.S. Department of Education, the accrediting body in the Western region, the only accrediting body, regional accreditor in the Western region that can accredit institutions that offer the associate degree. The changing of that is something that would be required by the colleges that are members and would take a period of time. In the meantime, these colleges have to remain accredited, and at this point, ACCJC is the body that's authorized to do that work.
Okay. Yes, Richard.
Just a quick follow-up. What do you personally think will be the result of next week's trial?
Next week's what?
Next week's trial. City of San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't know. They've called me to testify, and I've spent a number of hours giving depositions. It's been a interesting process. I think if I were reading the tea leaves, I'd say the judge has not been as supportive of the Accrediting Commission as they would like for.
Yes, Karen.
Pardon me if I'm asking you a question that's already been asked. So not that long ago, the council that advises you, the Consultation Council, thank you very much. The Consultation Council was involved with a task force that looked at accreditation and looked specifically at ACCJC. There had been such a task force some years ago that had produced recommendations. This task force was convened and produced recommendations, or drafted recommendations, I believe, more than a year ago. Have you already been asked about this? No. Okay. So, but those were never released to the public. And I asked about this. I'm sorry I didn't get an opportunity to ask you directly about this, but I asked David Morse, the statewide academic senate president, about this in July, I believe, and he told me that you had announced at Consultation Council that you were holding those back for now because you were concerned about what impact releasing it might have on City College, right? And I asked him, well, so what did he mean by this? You mean it might have a bad impact because it was going to be critical of ACCJC? And he said, basically, yes, that seemed to be what you were saying, and that's what everybody in the room understood. Now, I've tried to come up with a sort of softer or more polite word for retaliation, but I haven't come up with one because I think there really isn't a way in which retaliation is ever acceptable. But that completely, right, is in sync with what I heard throughout 2012, 2013, and beyond from certainly from faculty around the state and really also from administrators at other places, that with ACCJC, if you point out that things aren't being done fairly, right, there are going to be repercussions. There is going to be retaliation. So again, this is another question of why is the state tolerating an accreditor which everyone expects retaliation from? I wouldn't want retaliation from any kind of institution, but for an accrediting institution to respond to getting information that is true but unpleasant by getting even with somebody for having expressed those things, it just seems so, why is this tolerated? I'm sorry if you've been asked that part of the question before, but it really, I honestly, I can't understand it.
Let me clarify something. I did not release that report because I was worried about retaliation. I didn't release the report because right before that, the Board of Governors had acted to elevate a special trustee and basically the state takeover of this institution. At the time, releasing a report on accreditation by a body that's just taken over one of the colleges, I thought was going to do nothing more than muddy the water. Now, subsequent to that, as I mentioned a moment ago, and I think that was before you came in, we've reactivated that task force, and we do intend not only to take a look at those recommendations, but to take a look at them in consort with the recommendations that have been made by the state auditor about the Accrediting Commission. Now, as you know, the state auditor produced a report, but because the Accrediting Commission is a private body, they couldn't make recommendations to the commission, so they made all of them to the Chancellor's office. So now I have an audit report to respond to, and that's why we've reactivated the task force, not only to take a look at the recommendations they made originally, but specifically how those apply to the 9 recommendations of the state auditor. And I don't expect that process to be a lengthy one. I think the group will meet 2 or 3 times, and I suspect there'll be a report released probably in the first quarter of next year, if not earlier.
Will the earlier recommendations be?
Other folks. Rick?
I wanted to ask you, as of today, do you think the City College should be fully accredited? And if not, why not? And please give us specifics.
Things that needed to be completed at the time, and
yes or no, do you think we should be fully accredited as of today?
I can't answer that question. I don't think you should be terminated, that's for darn sure. I've made that crystal clear.
Well, let me also then, I'm really bothered that you can't answer a basic question like that. You've had many years to be thinking about it. You've had your special trustee in place here for 2 years, and how much longer it's going to take for him to get us to a point where we're fully accredited. But I just want to bring something to your attention. The U.S. Department of Education put out a purpose of accreditation, and they say in their document, the goal of accreditation is to ensure that education provided by institutions of higher education meets acceptable levels of quality. Meets acceptable levels of quality. That's their standard. And that's what you're supposed to be doing in accreditation. What did the ACCJC say about our college in 2012? They said that they concluded that the instructional program in credit and non-credit programs provides high quality instruction. So in other words, 2 years ago, we exceeded the standard of the Department of Education. And you can't stand here before us today and say that this college should be fully accredited at this point?
Yes,
So you aren't going to reply?
Well, I've answered your question. I cannot answer today.
We're in excess, according to the ACCJC.
He does deserve an answer, but let him answer that. Yeah. No? Pablo?
I I feel pleased and grateful that you're taking time and come to an institution that is so close to us that to many of us it's like our home, and right now it's bleeding. It's being mutilated for what we believe are not really rational reasons or logical reasons. City College is the house, times more than 100,000 students, and most of the students, some of the students look like me, and many of our brothers and sisters who are here. This is the only place for many of them to achieve their dreams. In the last 2-3 years, they have cut it in pieces, and we have lost more than 30,000 of those students. And day by day, we are losing more students. I just want to tell you that the moment I came to this country, City College was open the doors for me. And this is where I did my studies. I got some scholarships. I went and got my master's degrees, and I came back to teach our big family here. Now I feel that a big piece of us is being cut. I am teaching civics and governments at the moment. And I cannot tell you how I feel when I go and the students are asking me, why is our city college being cut like this? Why we are losing classes in one of the richest cities in the whole country, in the richest nation of the planet? Why is that happening? So it is very contradictory to me to come and to tell them that we have a right to be educated under our Constitution. And then at the same time, we have some people coming here to tell us that probably next week the court might, who knows, might tell us they'll no longer be helping the students in San Francisco. So I just want to, again, you know, I really feel very grateful that you are here with us. I feel like you are part of this family, and I feel also that you are not going to leave us suffering and bleeding as we are at the moment. Because we believe in you. We believe that education it should be for all of our students right here available. And the last thing I would like to say is just that if you can maybe just tell us 2-3 things that within the next 6 months you will do to keep City College open for everybody.
Well, first of all, I don't think, regardless of what the court does next week, that that's the death knell for the institution. Even if the court should go against the Accrediting Commission, there are other avenues, including restoration, which I fully expect the college to enter in January. In terms of what I'm going to do, I'm going to live up to what I said I would do, and that is to develop a plan and begin implementing it to return the college to local control. I'm going to continue to fight in the legislature to try to get the resources necessary, not only to back up the stabilization bill for this college, but to provide resources to add back the classes we need to serve the students not only of San Francisco but of the state. And then I'll do anything in my power along the way to be supportive of the activities all of you are doing, and the management team and ultimately the board, to restore the college to solid accreditation footage. What you don't want me doing, and what I won't do, is come over here and meddle on a day-to-day basis in your own restoration.
Umbrella job. And he's doing such a fine job.
Yes, Lou. You know, let me interrupt. Now, you may not agree with our elevation of Dr. Harris, but I can guarantee you that he and the Chancellor and the management team get up every day doing the best job they can to try to see this college back to restoration of accreditation. Ooh. So you can disagree with that, but that is a fact. Bob Agrella doesn't come in here trying to find a way to harm the students and the faculty and the staff of this college.
They're the wrecking crew. They're here to destroy us.
That's simply not true.
Yes, well, excuse me.
And to enrich themselves.
Thank you for coming. This is sort of like a broader question for our longer term. Community colleges, including this one, are sometimes seen as in between two school systems, the K-12 and the higher ed system. And each of them has a different approach. The university approach is faculty-driven and based on faculty professionalism, and it's really about the educators sort of setting the standard and the governance of the institutions. The K-12 are more of an administrative model, which sort of implicitly assumes less than full competency on the part of at least some faculty, and requires sort of people trained not necessarily in education but in management to run those institutions. City College, as my colleague pointed out, has always been highly regarded for having truly excellent academics. We have done this because we have traditionally had a faculty or university style model. Yes. How do you think that we can regain that model, and how can that model be used more broadly in the entire system, the university model? Thank you.
Well, I'd argue pretty vehemently that the system that we're using now is largely faculty driven. If you look at consultation, if you look at the legislation of shared governance in this state, faculty have a primary role in the majority of the operation of our institutions. Now that'll vary depending on institution, as you point out, because these are locally elected boards, and so there'll be differences in one community over another. But I think if you look at the leadership of the Academic Senate and of organized labor representing the faculty over the last 20+ years that I've been in California, that they've served our colleges extremely well. And you know, whether there is greater or lesser involvement of the faculty at a local institution is really determined at the local level.
I'm sorry, I just have to say something just for one moment about that comment. Last Thursday, when the Participatory Governance Council met, we had met several weeks ago, and we had decided to put language back in about the mission statement for the college, which included life skills and cultural enrichment. And then last Thursday, it was somehow out of there. And Chancellor Tyler was saying, sorry, we can't have that. We can't be all things to all people, hearing the same nonsense that we heard from ACCJC a few years ago, and we'll be hearing from Thelma Scott Skillman, folks that you put in there. So we are really quite upset. When you make that comment that we are now, the faculty are really sort of running the place. This is so outrageous a statement that we need to understand how you feel about it. And the facts don't back up what you're saying. That actually happened last Thursday. I'm not making that up. That really happened. So you should know that. So it wasn't a question, a comment. Sorry to digress. Let's see. I guess I'm going to call it Gus.
Thank you. I want to take us back to the three reasons that you seem to think our student population is down, and I'd like to bring up the fourth, which is the administration that we have now under the leadership of Robert Agrella is actively working to cut classes. It is obvious. Yes. The most obvious move came in the last day and a half or so with the decision that somehow they're going to program the computers so that when a student signs up for a class, if he hasn't fulfilled the prerequisites, he can't take the class. That isn't even legal. It isn't even legal because you have to have the opportunity to show that you fulfill the prerequisite in some other way. And a computer doesn't know that. They're just looking at your history at this college and saying, oh, you haven't taken these prerequisites? Well, you can't take the class. That's another person who will not get a class that they want to take. And we lost a couple of sites for teaching that were profitable. They brought money into the district for the amount of, ADA or FTES that they brought in compared to the cost to the district to rent them. They were both profitable, but the board and then Robert, I think under Robert we lost after the board got rid of one of them, and then I think the second one was lost under Robert Agrella because everyone's scurrying around trying to make it look like we're doing something in response to the ACCJC and trying to cut the amount of money we're spending on various things and not being all things to all people. So our language department is cut in half because one of the sites they took away was a language site. And it's gone now, and they said, oh, well, the students will go someplace else. No, they didn't. They didn't. We lost the students. And these are decisions, bad decisions being made by this administration. And that's where our students have gone, at least in part. Yes.
I'm a student. Welcome.
respecting the patience that you're being shown by folks who have serious interest in this university. You know, some of us come from a tradition where we've heard the phrase, we had to destroy the village in order to save it. And so an expression that people in this special position that you've appointed them to, who answer to you as I understand it, which means you can call them on the phone and say do this or don't do that, can say they're here to save this institution and yet get rid of classes, shrug their shoulders at where the students will go. Notice that shuttle buses from the Academy of Arts, Phoenix, are running around this street, looking at what? Real estate. And so any landlord knows that when you vacate buildings and vacate spaces, and yet you have to meet expenses for the physical plant, what's the temptation? Public-private partnerships. That's looming on this horizon, you know it. Yep. Let's rent some space to Phoenix so that over time this will become a city college kind of Phoenix, kind of public-private kind of, you know, invoke the word partnership. You know that's coming. In a market like San Francisco, you'd be insane not to know that. The land is part of the basis for the behavior of the accreditation process that has flipped, as you said, to something that's unimaginable. So I would hope that you, with the authority you have, to call that person on the phone and say, in the interest of saving the college, don't destroy it. Because there are many ways that that can happen in the name of saving City College, that it is ultimately undermined, laying off full-time instructors, substituting with non-full-time, with limited benefits. You know how this works. You've been around.
Thank you for letting me ask this question. Chancellor, a few months ago, I gave you a call to give you my thoughts about the restoration of the Board of Trustees, and you were kind enough to take that call. We now have appointments, the trustees have appointments on November 16th, which is the day before the Board of Governors is set to approve the plan, the restoration plan for the trustees that we haven't seen. So my question is, at that point, the Board of Governors will already have the plan in their agenda packet, since that's a Tuesday, assuming they would get it on a Friday. Is there anything that any trustee can say that will make you change what's in the plan at the board meeting and say, will you be coming to the board meeting saying, I've now spoken with some trustees and we're going to make these changes? Is that really possible?
Absolutely.
Or it is? Okay.
Yeah,
because otherwise it seems like a pro forma kind of meeting.
Yeah, no, it's not. That's exactly what happened with consultation and the policy on accreditation. We got calls and changed it before the meeting, and I've let the Board of Governors know the challenge that we face between election day and the board meeting, and that the draft they get will be just that, a draft, and in fact it'll be informed by conversations with the trustees.
Yes, Harry, you said you had a related question.
Related question. This goes back to the July meeting when the re-elevation or the resumption of the special trustee. Many people in this room were up there that day speaking, as you know, and you gave a rather eloquent response saying, I hear what you say, and I'm going to modify the resolution to some extent that you had proposed. I think it's, let me just read. I think it's reasonable to have this board talk about transition back to the locally elected board. We said from the beginning that this board, Board of Governors, doesn't want to be in the position of negating local control for 1 day longer than is necessary. She can change it right now. So I think it's reasonable to work with the college on a timeline and come back to you with a report of what that timeline and transition might look like at your November meeting. at that point, one of the newer members, Cecilia Estolano, said, I would like to add a phrase to that, in that report, in the development of that report, to consult closely with the local board of trustees in developing that transition plan. She got a second on that from Mr. Izumi, and just so I'm clear, the staff should present, she was asked, staff present the board at the November meeting and plan to reinstate the locally elected board. And she said, that has been developed with consultation with the board of trustees. I think if you asked Mr. Rizzo, and I have asked Anita Greer, they have not been contacted by it. We weren't sure if that was something that's done by Tyler, our chancellor, done by Umbrella. They said it's not their department. So it must be something with you, and I don't know how to get you to answer that question. So how are you going to involve them before November 16th? It's supposed to be closely. There's several incumbents. There are also some new blood that's going to come, and we don't know who they are going to be.
I'm going to meet individually with every one of them, as I promised the board I would.
And when will that be?
I think it's the week between the election and the board meeting in that week proceeding.
So why have you waited 2 or 3 months to do this?
Well, because the election takes
But there are
place.
incumbents who are not up for election.
Well,
They're the people that you can start with.
Yeah.
If you're serious about it, I think you would have started the process a long time.
Well, on the contrary, I'm serious about it, or I wouldn't be setting up as I told the board I would. Now, I'm not doing it on the schedule that you think I should, obviously, but by the time I go to that board meeting, I will have consulted with those trustees just as I promised.
Okay. Diane.
You said that you were going to take a time period to transition between the special trustee and our elected board. We didn't need any time to transition to a special trustee. My question really is legitimately, why do you feel that there needs to be a transition period if we duly elect a board that for many, many, many years did their job just fine?
Well, because I believe that getting the full control of the college back in the hands of the board and making sure that the Board of Governors doesn't have to undo anything they've done needs to be very carefully planned. And in fact, the trustees need to be involved in the conversation about how that process ought to take place.
Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. I'd just like to say, in light of the fact that the chairperson of the Federal Reserve just recently came out saying that the biggest problem facing our economy today is income inequality. And she went on to say that only there are 4 ways we can remedy that, and one being access to education. And in light of the Great Recession that occurred, and all of us here together decided not to cut classes because we knew that students needed access to classes, we knew people needed jobs. We were basically following a John Maynard Keynesian model of economic stimulus during a recession. That was the very reason we were told to show cause. So how is it now that it not only demoralized us, but it lacked the sort of logic that now is coming to light. So what is your office going to do to ensure that this never ever happens to another community college in the state of California?
Well, to be specific, we asked the legislature and the administration last year to fund a technical assistance unit so we could get out into the field and work with colleges that are struggling. Unfortunately, the governor put 9 positions to staff that unit and invested $2.5 million in a contract with the college to deliver those services. And I think in large part that was due, and again, I came into this process after the commission had already taken a lot of action against this particular college, but I basically said to the administration, you've got a $6+ billion investment in California community colleges, and you have virtually no support for that system on a statewide basis. And so I think they listened and they staffed and funded the beginnings of that technical assistance unit. I think it's going to take a lot more over time, and fundamentally, when you have a chronically underfunded system, as we do, colleges are going to struggle often. So that's what we've done, and we'll see if it works. And I want to warn you, I got another 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes. So I want to ask you one question before you go. There's a lot of questions out here. It's going to take more than 5 minutes. So I want to know that is it okay that everybody who doesn't have their question answered here, we can email them to you, and then you can maybe answer it later on for all of us, because I know there's a lot of people who really, you can see how, what interested faculty we have here.
If you send me the questions, I'll do my best to give you a turn.
Okay, that's great. Yes, Deborah.
Okay, I'm not real good at making questions like I'm playing Jeopardy. But on the never again, don't let this happen again, with trying to fix what accreditation should be, it should be supportive. The way when we evaluate each other, we support improvement. And accreditation, our experience has been the opposite. We have been severely damaged, and we have spent the past 2.5 years reacting in a piecemeal fashion to that. I don't see, we should have been given a time to create a real plan. We've never been given that. Whatever happens, please make it so that accreditation can be helpful in improving things and supporting improvement, and not this destructive mess that we have been. It's not ending. It's not over. There is no end in sight. And just pushing it down the road only creates more disaster. And do something to prevent the situation from continuing.
You and I agree completely. The accreditation, I've been involved in accreditation for 40 years. It is so dramatically different today than it was even 5 or 10 years ago in terms of how punitive it has become, how regulatory it has become, how non-peer review oriented it has become. And it's not only in the western region, although I think it's manifested more in ACCJC than it is in many other places, but we're seeing this in regions all across the country. And I have made it crystal clear to the Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Education that we have to figure out a way to do a better job of this. I will tell you that a lot of us thought at the end of the Bush administration that the sprees and a lot of the other intrusion into accreditation by the federal government would go away. Instead, when the administration changed, it just got ramped up even more. And there is a increasing federal pressure to bureaucratize this process, which does not fit the academy. In fact, we in America are the envy of the world in terms of a peer review process, and yet we're seeing that slip away. So you and I agree completely on that. And if I had a wand that could fix it, I would. But it's going to take more time than that. I can only agree that I'll be an advocate for returning to a peer review process.
Yeah, so Lisa.
Chancellor Harris, I want to thank you for, this has been substantial time, and you've spent most of it answering our questions, and we really appreciate that. I'm guessing that when you got up this morning, you didn't get up bright and bushy-tailed to say, oh boy, I get to face City College. So thank you for that. You got a little bit tetchy when, because you feel the anger in this room around the special trustee and some of our current administration. And you know, I heard you get a little bit like, wait a minute, no personal attacks kind of thing. But I do want to say that for the faculty at this college, and I think a lot of students at this college, the last 2 years, the last 2+ years, have felt like getting up every day and being personally attacked. Yes. That's, you know, we've had every day. And that's been not just the Accreditation Commission. It's been not just, what's happening in Sacramento. It's been not just the press. It's been our own administration who, despite the fact that I actually agree with you, somebody's going to yell at me for this, I actually agree with you. I don't think that those folks get up every day thinking about how to destroy City College. I know there are people in this room who think that might be true. I don't think that. But the fact of the matter is that for most of us here, every day for the last couple of years has felt like being ground into the dirt. And you can hear what people are saying. That's very real, you know. You said in your declaration that if you had known what would happen, that you, although I heard you say something different today, but it sounded like you said in your declaration that if you had known, you would not have appointed a super trustee, you wouldn't have elevated a Grella if you had known what would happen. Rather than ask you about that, I'd really like to know, given what's happened at City College of San Francisco and given everything we know now, and that you know now compared to what we knew before, do you have any regrets? Do you wish that we had done something different, your office had done something different along the way?
No, let me go back and make sure everybody understands. What I said was, if I had believed at the time I asked the board to elevate the special trustee that the college would lose its accreditation anyway, I would not have made that recommendation. I do think that the game has changed pretty dramatically, especially in the last 6 to 9 months. And if you had a crystal ball, you probably would do things that you did at some point differently. But at the time we made the decision, and even yet today, I believe the quickest pathway to get the accrediting body off the backs of this college are to get into this restoration, finish up the problems, and get out.
There's nothing wrong with the college.
Well, restoration.
Restoration. No, he has no regrets.
No regrets.
So long. There's a phrase. You have to go one more. Roger.
Talk about restoration.
I've exhausted all of my negative vocabulary describing the ACCJC, and I've used many of the same criticisms for you personally and the Board of Governors, and I stand by those, right or wrong. However, I recognize that there's been some positive evolution here. I think you've come from a cheerleader for the ACCJC to at least a circumstantial ally of the college, especially in this trial. And I also think that your comments about neutralizing the fascistic power of the ACCJC is a step forward as well. However, I think that you, as the leader of the community college system in California, a magnificent system that should be very different from what it is now. And again, I've never heard you say that you support the California Master Plan for higher education. If I were in your position, that would be something that I would think about every day and use most of my energy to affect an implementation of that magnificent and revolutionary system. What's happening at City College is really the focal point of that struggle to re-energize the California Master Plan for higher education and to resist the privatization of public education happening in this state and so many parts of the world. So how can we have faith in you until you profess to really believe in making the California Master Plan for higher education the revolutionary and humane educational plan that it was meant to be and should be? And one final comment about statistics. When we had 60 years ago, 50 to 60 years ago, we had only 16 million people in California. At that time, we had 2.45 million people in public higher education. Well, if that ratio remained constant today, we would have 5.5 million people in California public higher education, whereas we have slightly over 3 million. And that's a shame, and it's something that you should take very personally, and you should enlist the support of like-minded people who believe in the power of education to affect that positive change.
I agree completely with you. I've been outspoken in support of the master plan. I do believe that, especially with the last 4 or 5 years, that we've disenfranchised a whole generation of Californians that, unless we move pretty quickly, is likely to stay disenfranchised. I've spoken out in the legislature with civic and business leaders, with voters, with faculty and staff. that the two top priorities of this system have, since I walked in the door, been the restoration of access to the system and the enhancement of student success, the students that are enrolled. So you and I don't disagree on any of those things, and I do come to work every day with those two focuses in the work that I do, and I try to spend the lion's share of my time on those. I genuinely appreciated this. Pardon?
We'd like to see evidence of that.
I genuinely appreciate
the president of our academic senate has a question. She had to come late. She was at a meeting dealing with self-study, and she would like to ask a question. So if you would for a moment, that would be fine.
So I haven't quite articulated it as a question, but I wanted to point out that the team that visited City College voted for probation unanimously, not for show cause. And since then, we've completed this laundry list of action plans, over 300 action plans, 95%. We just finished another self-evaluation that your representative accepted, a self-evaluation that actually has very few identified improvements. It has some close the loop on some things, and that document has been accepted. We should not be where we are. We should be accredited and held to the standards of every other college. And it's kind of disheartening to hear you say we should go through the restoration process when that document, having read it, is so highly problematic. It doesn't, it's a punitive political document. And for everything that you're saying about how important education is, and I want to second the comment that was made over here about how solving the economic inequality is to offer education, and we did that. We stood for our values, and we did that, and we should be fully accredited. And I believe that that's what you should take away from this. Thank you.
I know it was probably somewhat of a difficult process to come here, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come from Sacramento to do this. And thank you very, very much.